Going live. We are live.
Good morning.
Good
Saber
morning.
community. Happy Father's Day. We just had this really great idea, I don't know, my father wasn't much of a nerd. I mean, he was an artist, visual artist. He's great, but he wasn't much of a nerd. So we thought us nerd fathers who work light weaponry should get together and express what it's like about being dads that do that. But before we begin, I'd like to really thank TPLA and Anonymous for hosting the event, and for Desso and Alfred for showing up, and for all of us having that connection of being, I think that's kind of one of our main connections actually, is that we're all dads. And I think that's one of the things that really kind of keeps us in conversation with each other. And so happy Father's Day. And I guess maybe I just want to start the conversation about, like, how is everyone's family doing? How is it being dad?
Oh man, I'll start that one off for you. We're doing great, actually.
Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Did it freeze up?
Yeah. I can hear you, Desso.
Okay. We're doing great. Our whole family has been about fandom since they were little. We started really just with watching shows with them, like cartoons and stuff like that. We kind of branched off into doing anime or regular shows. Like Doctor Who was a really big one for us. We do D&D together now that the kids are a bit older. It's a whole family event, because it's not, you can sit and have a conversation about these things even after the show's done or after the game's done. And it can be something that you talk about over dinner, and it's engaging for the whole family instead of everybody just separating and going off into their own rooms.
So I think you probably have the oldest kids of our group. My kids.
I wasn't saying anything, but yes, I've got.
Yeah,
one.
well, I didn't mean that in the very. I'm just pointing it out. Because we all like, Alfred, I think you have the youngest kid, if I'm right, right? Yeah, like yours is pretty new. She's like almost like just like 2 now or something. Yeah,
that's right.
And mine's 5, so I'm kind of the middle. I'm the middle child.
Mine's going to be a senior next year, so my oldest is. So that's there's a lot in that, but I mean that's a long time. I get to be the most tenured in this particular endeavor. But yeah,
tenured nerd dad.
Tenured nerd dad. But yeah,
we gotta make that a t-shirt.
As you guys come up, as your kids get older and your kids come to you with their fandoms, like I've been a video game person since I was 4 years old, but my son's coming to me with like playthroughs of stuff like, say, Portal or things like that, where he's like, "Oh, you need to see this." And it's weird because it's like, no, I'm the video game person. Me, I do video games. That was coming up when I was growing. You can't, you know what? Show me anyway. And we'll sit there, and it's like watching a movie, and then afterward we get all those like Monty Python like nerd references where it's she's doing all these sick burns. I say she, the main bad guy from Portal, she's doing all these really sick burns to the main character, and he's been quoting these things for like 2 weeks, and I'm like, why are you talking to me like that? And now it's like, gotcha, I get your reference. You especially, Alfred, are going to be looking forward to that in 10 years, but you might start, Damon, getting that in the next couple years as you're...
I get it. Sometimes my son, he says some stuff of things that he's into, which is awesome. He's a brainiac too. So sometimes he'll just start giving me random quotes about how, nuclear fusion works. he's off the charts, like brain. It's crazy.
And that's
he's like, I'm 5 and I'm learning the periodic table. And I'm like, okay, cool. Great. You're going to probably either live on Mars or be the most greatest hacker that ever lived.
That's something as well that my partner and I were discussing recently, was how our 2 children are completely different while having so many things in common. When my son was growing up, he was the corrector.
Hey, Todd.
And when somebody would say something like, oh, my finger hurts, his response was, no, it's phalanges. And he's 3 years old. So the other end of that, our daughter, she's the manipulator. She's the one who would come up to you and say, those presents under the tree aren't Christmas presents because it's not Christmas. So we should go ahead and open them.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, Todd, welcome. This is a nice surprise.
Hi.
Hey. So we were just talking about our kids. I'm the middle child with the kid that's like 5. Alfred has the youngest, and Desso has the 2 older ones. So what's your family story, bro?
Actually, I was the youngest one out of 3 brothers, and really, I was always the one that they always kicked around and picked on all the time.
Oh, so that's interesting in itself. So bringing that now that so Alfred, did you want to say anything?
No, not much other than, my 2-year-old, she's now starting to mimic, right? So she's able to reproduce those words that she sees in her cartoon. So I'm starting to see that already, like just from its growth. And it's funny because it's through cartoons and such that I realized that's where a good chunk of her early vocabulary came from. There would be certain, syllables that she would put together, and she would repeat them over and over and over. An example, uh-oh, right? So, uh-oh, everything was uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. And next thing you know, I'm watching an episode of a cartoon that she watches, and it's like every 3rd sentence or every 3rd line is uh-oh. And I'm like, this is where it comes from. Got it. All right. So now, and I tend to monitor those things now more than before because I'm a new dad, right? So I never knew that sort of stuff happens, not so quickly. So now I'm a little bit more picky as to what she's going to choose. If it's a very loud cartoon that's very, lots of high pitches and everything, I understand she's going to go ahead and she's going to mimic that. Is that necessarily something that I want to expose her to at such an early age? Because it could just develop into a bad habit, right? So I now understand the responsibility that comes with this role. what I could potentially, show her and have around her. So this will be interesting with our talk.
I saw my granddaughter watching The Amazing World of Gumball, and I caught maybe 3 minutes. I'm like, you can't have that channel on watching this here at our house when we're watching it. You ever see that one? It's like schizophrenic cats. It's really loud, fast movement, and it's like, whoa, this is not good. And they binge it. I mean, they'll play it all day on I think Cartoon Network. I mean, hours of it. I just caught a little bit of it. I'm like, whoa, no, this is not good. You can't watch this here, Grandma and Grandpa's house.
Things are fast now, man. So that being said, let's start with I Am Your Father, which is really great when you watch. I just have to say right off the cuff, anyone who has not watched Star Wars in another language, whether you speak that language or not, is really missing out. I think watching Star Wars in French was probably one of the most enlightening experiences I ever had, because they don't call it the dark side of the Force, they call it the obscure side, which is very interesting. And they call him Monsieur Vader, which is super and Yoda in French is awesome because he already talks backwards, and then I have no idea what they're saying because I don't speak French, but he's Le Force. It's so rad. So anyways, I just encourage everybody to do that for entertainment purposes. And if you speak those languages that Star Wars has dubbed in, you're going to notice that some characters, I don't know, the Emperor speaking French, being evil, is way more diabolical to me. I have no idea. He's like some weird ancient evil Templar knight that got recreated that shoots lightning. Anyways, that's way off subject. And I think my coffee's finally kicking in. So, dads in Star Wars. So I think maybe a good question to start is as a kid, when you first saw Star Wars, outside of the turning point of Vader being Luke's dad, did you see any characters that spoke to you as a kind of father role model, and vice versa? As you got older, as a dad, did you relate to any of the characters as a father role model, maybe?
Actually, yeah. Yeah, you mentioned that. You know, I had a weird thing happen. I'll make a long story short, but I found my father after searching for over 30 years. You know, we had the modern advent of ancestry, DNA, and everything. And I was raised just in a small automotive town in Michigan. You know, dad, grandfather, they were all auto workers. Well, it was like a big family secret. I finally tracked this guy down who didn't know I existed. And it's like meeting a 25-year-old version of yourself. And I equate it to being like, hey, I'm Luke Skywalker. My dad's Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's not Darth Vader. He's Obi-Wan. So yeah, the whole story, I guess I kind of relate to it now at more I'm in my 50s now, and to find all this out later on in life, it's freaking exciting and help propel my life in a whole different direction than staying in cold Michigan. I'm going to move someplace where it's actually warm for a change. So
wow.
Likes the sand.
Yeah.
I can't say that any of the characters really spoke to me in a father-esque thing. There wasn't really that kind of connection to Star Wars. It was all about the adventure and the characters in that adventure. And I think coming from that aspect, of course, been a big D&D fan for a long time, it still has that whole, the different tropes. You got the Dark Knight, you've got the young hero, you've got the evil sorcerer at the top of the tower. In this case, it's in the sky in the form of the Death Star. I think coming at it from that perspective has really helped me as a father when bringing my children in on different fandoms, including Star Wars.
You know, Gonk has a special role in my life. And no, I'm kidding. Well, he does, but not as a father. I don't know why he went there.
I've always related to Uncle Owen.
Uncle Owen? The very short-lived Uncle Owen?
Yeah. That wizard's just a crazy old man.
You know, for me, growing up, watching it, you know, my dad was estranged from the family from a very early age for me. So the relationship that Luke has with his father early on, you know, that was it. As I watched and consumed media as a kid, you know, I always tried to find how I relate more than anything else. And I always definitely gravitated more towards Luke, especially, you know, from watching the first film, because, you know, I didn't really understand the concept of Han Solo being a smuggler and all this sort of stuff. But, you know, this kid who's living with his aunt and uncle out in the middle of nowhere, and he has like bigger dreams, like that immediately just made that relationship with me. And I think it's universal, you know, boys, girls, what have you. And I think that the genre does that so well because it captures that and it continually revamps it every decade with these new characters that you can definitely relate to and be, you know, identify with.
One thing too, I find with Star Wars, it mimics a lot of history, you know, some of the worst parts of human history, really, because, you know, Lucas based a lot of the stormtroopers off the Germans, off the Nazis. I mean, my family, we've been here since the 1700s going back, and we fought during the Revolutionary War, Civil War. My grandfather in World War II, uncles, all of us. I was in the Gulf War in the first go around in the sandbox over there in direct combat in a tank. And I guess Star Wars has always spoke to me because I was always aware of my family's history from that standpoint, that even the family I was raised with, we were always military. You're expected, you hit 18, you go serve your country. Well, again, getting older and watching these movies, it has that same feel to it, the same kind of order and the same goals that's always been really part of being a soldier and being somebody that served and raised my right hand in an oath to always serve this country. And seeing it all play out in the films, it just kind of goes hands in hands. and reinforces, I guess, my fandom from a whole different standpoint, whole different point of view.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
Very cool.
Yeah, just the fight against the white against the dark.
Mm-hmm.
On that note, with that history in mind, Todd, do you have a favorite of the Star Wars?
That's a good question. Actually, I think episode 5, Empire Strikes Back. That's one of my favorites. It's just how they go from all this is going on. They're all hiding out on Hoth, trying to stay hidden on this base to fight against the Empire, and they show up. And these guys all have to leave very quickly. I mean, it got a little bit goofy further parts. I'm not a fan of the Ewoks, but still, that whole movie was great. If I'm talking about the right one, I get them mixed up after 12.
Yeah, Empire is just a really great, outside of just the genre, Empire is just a very great film in general. And it's just well written. And every time I watch it, I kind of learn something more from it. And it's again, coming back to maybe not a father figure, but that has the great mentor relationship where Yoda's first introduced and Luke enters into the actual suffering of Jedi training.
Yes.
Starts moving R2 around with his mind when he doesn't need to and stuff. And then there's something about, for me, my father was always an incredibly creative individual, and we always had great creative discussions. And but I always had a lot of really good father relationships with a lot of my teachers and mentors. And so in a lot of ways, Luke's relationship with I guess all of us growing up, it comes back to different paths in Luke's journey. We could take it like that as boys and young men, and like, wow, you anointed with that part of your father. You relate to Obi-Wan as a guide. You have this crazy mentor that lives in a swamp, and there's something that's a really great film, and I think it teaches kids the crossing of that threshold.
And being raised in just, in a hopeless place. If you grew up someplace out in the country where there's not many job prospects and you're expected to do a thing when you graduate, well, that's great, Luke. You're going to be, here, stay on another season. We're moisture farmers. You can't expect much more of that out of your life. You're going to be a moisture farmer. I relate to that totally.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm really excited with how much has come out of Star Wars in the last several decades. That there's so many characters now that we can relate with, and I'm really excited of sharing the Clone Wars with my daughter, because I think it's going to be the most easily accessible, considering that it's a cartoon. We can smooth right into it rather than a movie where it's like, oh, okay, real life now, and it could get scary, I think that Star Wars has done an amazing job with this, because I think it handles like, what is this role of a father, and it shows the influence that it has. For me, the last thing that really took my breath away was Rebels, right? And how mature those characters were. How you could take a guy like Kanan and be like, all right, now you got this kid Ezra, and you have to play this father figure now, and every single thing that you tell him is going to shape his destiny or his journey. The same for Anakin with Ahsoka, and how many of his decisions would end up having these massive repercussions in her life and where she ends up. So I think that the genre does a great job of that, to show people how their decisions, their influences really have an impact across all the generations. And I guess that's what it's really become now. It's a portrait of this generational, story that we get to see how things have evolved because of decisions that are made from the very past, or the ways how they influence things.
Yeah, it's definitely saga status now.
I definitely like how you brought Rebels and Clone Wars into this. Rebels, I feel, has more of that father figure in Kanan viewpoint, because he ends up being there with Ezra throughout most of Ezra's journey from street rat to Jedi Padawan. And he ends up kind of filling in a little bit with Sabine as well. And then he ends up being father to everybody, spoilers for anybody who hasn't watched it, when he is in his last moments in his last episode. With Clone Wars, you do see that, but because of that anthology viewpoint and how it's portrayed, you can only get it in clumps. Whereas with Rebels, because it's linear, you get to see it from essentially Ezra's birth as a Jedi into his full growth as a Jedi. And I think there's something to be said about that.
One thing that strikes me about as I grow older and kind of, I relate a lot to Obi-Wan as a man now, in the sense that I have this martial tradition. I live kind of in isolation. My kid lives in another state. You know, I'm figuring things out. And also, I think what I related to Obi-Wan with, especially in Clone Wars, it was his conflict of the Jedi and also his desire to be with that Mandalore queen lady. And what was she, a baroness or something? I can't remember.
Duchess?
Duchess, that's right, Duchess Satine or something. And, you know, a conflict of like, I'd lived this path. However, this is what, you know, and I think that happens a lot in people's life, especially when you take up any kind of martial tradition and you have to be away. I don't know. That's something that I think about a lot, is how do we as dads deal with the conflict of decision making process and stuff like that. Is there anything else from Star Wars that strikes to us? Should we talk about another genre, or we want to hang out in here?
Well,
you can always come back.
Yes.
Star Wars itself really helped catapult my children into fandoms, because my son had a Star Wars birthday and he got his first real cosplay as Luke from Return of the Jedi, and we got him the replica Luke lightsaber, and we had little Target TIE fighters that we shot foam darts at as part of just the whole thing, and just bringing it all back together. That was the party that got us involved with wanting to learn how to fight with a lightsaber. So we all went outside with painted sticks and started whacking at each other, one red, yellow, green, and blue, and just had a lot of fun with it. So that was the Star Wars journey for the family.
Birthdays, they'll pull everyone in.
Yep.
Yeah, they do. We'll go into like Dungeons and Dragons. Why don't we like switch up and go fantastical? When I think of Lord of the Rings, you know, another kind of isolated character is Aragorn. You never really see Aragorn's dad, which is really interesting, even though he has this relationship with an elf, and they eventually probably, and in the films, they have this kid and all this kind of stuff. The books are a little different and everything, but I'm just going to stick to the films. And, you know, I really want to know what Aragorn's dad was about. You know, and then I think a lot of ways, I think Aragorn had a subsequent like stepdad, and maybe like Gandalf or something like that. I think I could not stand Elrond as a dad. I'm just like, God, so, I mean, I dig him, but he's just so pompous. I think Anonymous had a question. Can you bring that question up again, Anonymous? I couldn't hit the chat fast enough. Or do you want to just chime in?
What parts of the fandoms do you share with your kids the most? Like,
oh, that's a great question. I think I share, since my kid's 5, I just follow his lead in the share of adventure. Like if it's like kind of what Desso was saying. It's like if we're walking down a path and all of a sudden he's like, oh, I'm going to take this path. And I just, you know, share that adventure and be like, oh, you know, what does this make you think of? And, you know, sometimes he'll think like, oh, you know, this looks like the little part in the Death Star trench or something, you know, things like that, you know, but he's just one step at a time. But it's like, what about you, Desso?
Oh, for me, it is wide ranging because I've got 2 teenagers. So we've got the references from the movies or shows that we'll have in just regular conversation. If we're talking about an item or, a vehicle that drove by, somebody will make a quote, from like Disenchantment or Doctor Who or just whatever. And everybody in the car already knows. It's those inside jokes at this point where we all know what we're talking about. And it just kind of progresses from there.
Did Doctor Who ever have any kids?
Interesting.
I've never really watched Doctor Who. I love it, but I just haven't had time. And I just love the old 80s. So
there's
cheesy.
an episode called The Doctor's Daughter where he has a clone that's made of him, but she's female instead of male. And it's one episode that she's in, and that's it. Now, in the first episode,
That's like so Data.
53, he has a girl on the TARDIS with him that calls him grandfather. That does not mean that they're related, but there's that. So we're assuming, at some point he had kids.
Interesting. Boy, what
I think what I share the most right now is going to be the droids. I think that's like one of the easiest things because it's gadgets, it's things like that. They can touch it, from an early point. Just showing them like, look, it's an R2 unit. It's a BB-8 unit. In fact, she's got a BB-8
Then they see a
unit.
vacuum cleaner and they're like, listen, it's a droid.
We have an air purifier, and it has a droid name as well, and it's her same height. So she always goes up to it, and it's always like pressing the buttons because that's what it's all about for her. So yeah, that's our first step into that.
My kid did that with our photocopier. Like it was like a robot to him. It was a droid to him. Yeah, I remember that now. And it would print out paper, and he would always like somehow run the default print test where it just had like the lines, the colored lines, and he was like, "I got a secret message," and I'm like, "That's awesome."
The D&D. We're back to D&D.
Back to D&D. Sure. I think I started getting them involved with like the cartoon at least. Young.
I mean, the old one with like Tiamat
The
and
80s?
stuff?
The old one with Tiamat and Venger and stuff, and we have them on disc, so we ended up watching them as a family. But I started getting them in that, and then just kind of adventure-y stuff. In the past, I want to say couple of years, I've started really getting them involved in like gaming itself. But, we had a few forays, or we would tell them about games that we've had and how the stories went and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, fireside storytelling in that regard. Because it's about the heroics of different characters and things. So, I mean, there's a lot to be taken from that. And you brought up Lord of the Rings. Of course, Lord of the Rings was one of the major influences to Dungeons and Dragons. But there's so much now that is out there. We're gonna touch on Critical Role, which is something that I've been introduced within the past year because of quarantine. And while I don't let them watch it, I do kind of explain how stuff works while I'm in game because of these examples that are provided by very, very well versed people in the games. It comes out really well at that case.
Dungeons and Dragons has expanded so much since my 1974 first edition player's handbook.
Yep.
I mean, those old rules are incredibly cruel. I mean, just trying to become a bard is insane. Got to be a thief and then a fighter, and then man, it's it's just like you never make it past level 4, you're done. And and I just think it's just gone expanded so much. It's really allowed for a lot of people to express their creativity.
I think one of the best things about having kids that play D&D with you is you don't have as much of an issue getting your group together. You don't have that, well, my schedule doesn't line up with yours this week. We all have the same schedule at this point.
Yeah.
So there's that.
That's cool.
My daughter loves the Monster Manual.
That was my first book, was a Monster Manual.
That's the one, right? You're going through, you have so many drawings. That's what pulls you in, right? Who wants to see a book filled with just like, who wants to go through the DMG first edition? Like nobody wants to go through that. It's all just charts, tables, the size 8 font. Amazing that they were able to pull that together when they did. But yeah, the Monster Manual. I have my D&D books pretty much right next to me, and then my daughter, you know, when she's home and not in daycare, like she's usually right here next to me, and of course she starts going through like the comic books and the stuff. But when she gets to the D&D books, I'm always like, I got to keep the watchful eye because those books are super heavy, right? And the corners are like weapons, especially the 5th edition. But sure enough, once she gets that Monster Manual, like that's the only one that I see that she understands somewhat what's happening. And then, you know, it's just a matter of her just going through the pages. And it's cute seeing how sometimes she may say a word or something from a cartoon or something that relates to whatever that she points at. So like the other day, she, you know, the Pixie came out and she pointed out, and, you know, she made the relationship with her mom. And I was like, that's cute. That's awesome. That's a great thing that I can tell her mom, you know, later on today. And I got to share that with her. So I think that the Monster Manual and that aspect of the fantasy, the drawings more than anything else, the art books is going to be the way how I can at least open the door and be like, what's this? Check this out.
Oh yeah, man. The Dungeons and Dragons artwork now is really good. I mean, if I pull out my old Player's Handbook and you look at the art in that, it's like out of Mad Magazine, yo. It's like just, you know, wizards making people trip on banana peels. I mean, I think it's awesome. You know, but it's super, I mean, it's of that generation. It's like the old film heavy metal, like that style, like of animation where it's like hand drawn and you can kind of see it's hand drawn. And I mean, it's this classic transitional period where, you know, technology was trying to catch up to the artistic ability of the human, and now it's more integrated. So you get these crazy elaborate artworks that are, you know, can be digitally comparable to aspects of Velasquez. And it's, you know, but back then it was different.
I'm going to caution against playing with smart children. There were a lot of different ology books, like Piratology and, you know, Demonology, and these big kids books that are designed to look like old tomes and stuff like that. And because we're nerds, we bought like almost all of them. And then there was a separate group that had like little figurines and stuff that had like the stories of the like the Greek mythos and stuff like that. So when my kids were still single digits, I think my son was 9, we're playing a D&D game. We're running all the rules. We're just there to have them tell the story. And they come upon the final boss altar with the demon at the end. And my son says, I performed the demon sign. And I look at him and say, what is that? And he says, oh, it's the hand signal that dispels all demons. What are you talking about? He gets up and goes to his room and comes back with the book, flips through, and he's like, it's right here. And it's like the, you know, the little hand symbol. I don't remember exactly what it was. But it's like, I do the demon sign. I'm looking at hit points. I'm looking at this thing. I look at him. Congratulations, you've defeated the demon. And just, you win that one. That one's on you. And it's on me for not, you know, explaining the rules, but we're telling the story. And I think that's what a lot of the game nowadays, 5th edition especially, is about the story. If you can come up with a good something to progress the story, let it happen. Rule of cool, I think they call it. But
Ooh,
yeah,
cool. Todd, a question came through down the horn for you. Do you relate to your grandkids with certain things than you did differently with your kids when it comes to fandom? Like, do you and your grandkids have a different kind of connection with this kind of fan mythology than you and your own children do?
Yeah, strangely enough, my son never really got into Star Wars. Never really had much of an interest in it. He was a bit of an artist, but he was always into his own thing, and he got into anime a little bit, but he never really was a fan of Star Wars. And my grandkids started having them around here because we helped raise the youngest one for a couple of years, just doing daycare thing. And I got both of them into it, and they both really enjoy Clone Wars. They have watched The Mandalorian a good 3 or 4 times.
Nice.
And they're getting into the movies more and more too. But yeah, strangely enough, my son, it really wasn't an interest for him, and really the lightsaber thing all started happening for me building them well after he was an adult and out of the house. So that answers the question.
Yeah, that's a good dad one. The Mandalorian, man. The Mandalorian's a cool dad one where he's just like thrust into the position of a dad. And I mean, and it's very specific in that series. It's just called The Child, right? I mean, come on. And it's always him. I really like that series because he's always in the like, well, first this is a job. And then like I have this connection, but I'm still in maybe some sort of denial about this connection. And I just like the last episode. He's like, wait a minute, you want me to take this kid to a group of sorcerers that did battle with us for centuries or something, whatever his line is. And he's like, yeah, he's like, okay, I'm dad now. Like, get in the ship, basically. And I think that's an incredible transformation process of just acceptance of, okay, I have this being I'm responsible for. And despite whatever my past current goals were with my life, now I really got to change that and rise up to that challenge, which is maybe one of the greatest of all challenges.
Well, that's what made that series brilliant too, is that right at the first episode, they're introducing you to the child. And it's a baby Yoda. Oh my God. It drew everybody in right there, I believe, is one of the reasons it was that successful to start with. And you look at any of the Star Wars movies or series, there's always some goofy character that the kids fall in love with. I mean, we started out, what do we have? My first thing as a kid, I was 9 years old watching episode 4 going, robots! Wow!
3PO and R2.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you couldn't help but get drawn in because they were the main characters focused on right at the beginning of the movie. They're right there in your face and they're stuck on this desert planet now. That was great. And then, of course, the next one, you got the Ewoks, which I always thought, how much of a threat are goofy little teddy bears that are supposed to live in trees, but they can barely walk? But again, it was aimed at the younger audience to draw them in. It's something that during Celebration 19, they were talking about it with the guy that played Jar Jar Binks, that after that whole thing happened, I mean, he had a hard time finding any work. He was suicidal, everything else. And Lucas sat him down and said, look, right now, yeah, everybody hates you as a character. Within a few years, all them children growing up with this, they're going to love you. Within 15, 20 years, you're going to be a beloved, remembered character and you're going to move on. And that's exactly what happened. So getting back to that, though, I believe they always try to endear to the different age groups of people with each movie towards the characters that they introduce.
I think Chopper kind of fills.
Say that again, Desso.
I think Chopper kind of fills that role in Rebels, the goofy character. He's not goofy by himself, but
he's a kind of smart ass astromech, right?
That's the one. His retorts in the concept of R2D2, where it's just sounds and everybody responding to him, really like the same thing with Chewie, where you don't know what he's saying until you hear the context from somebody else. It's like, oh, and I think that kind of almost mystery in the moment. They do a better job of emoting with Chopper because they can animate him to be as fast as they want. So you kind of have an idea, but having that in there really is going to draw in the kids. So you'll have kids running around and just being goofy in their own way.
Kids love sounds. I know that from teaching kids with the ninja kids that I teach with that program. It's like they'll come in. Let's say one of the kids I taught was just last week. He watched I don't know, what is it, that film King Kong versus Godzilla? Okay. And he was just running around like a gorilla the whole class, which of course I don't mind being a monkey stylist, right? Monkey kung fu. I'm like, this is great. So, you know, and he was just being, and he would run and then like pound his chest and then grab and window escape. And I'm like, that's just do it, dude. You know, but he was doing sounds. It wasn't words, right? Is exactly what he talked about, like with Chopper. It's like those sounds brought him in. And I really like it for a creative outlet like that for yourself. Sounds are cool. And not only that, it makes you pay attention to different things going on in the body language and stuff. That's one thing I loved about Chewbacca, is that like his body language is so awesome in so many of his scenes when you go back and kind of really watch it and stuff. Like when he's like afraid of, what was it? I can't remember the thing he was afraid of. Was it like when they were in the crusher thing or something, or like in the, you know, what an incredible smell you discovered. And he was just so like irritated. I love it when Chewie gets irritated. It's so funny.
Mannerisms, right? That is the acting right there. What you're doing.
Not only that, with kids, Alfred, right? Like you're training and then all of a sudden your kid picks up something. That's what I noticed with Marcus, my son. It's like, so if I'm doing my training, you know, he'll just pick up a piece of cardboard and start doing it. You know, it's like, wow. It's like, there you go. There's that physical communication, like right there through it, which is awesome. And then he'll watch Star Wars and see the lightsaber stuff and be like, oh, okay, this is starting to connect.
Yeah, it's key to have those silly characters that definitely will help flesh out a way for kids to access that, because it can't all be politics, right? It can't all be trade embargoes. You'll lose everybody, even the oldest kids.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I don't know if I'm on film because I'm looking at the chat. Okay, we have a couple questions. One is this is from Ben. I wonder if one of the things that is intriguing about Star Wars is that it also forces you to negotiate tensions with parental figures. And adding on to that, what are the lessons that we take away from the conflicts with father figures prior to the mythic atonement? Ooh. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Luke's too happy to learn that Vader's his dad. He didn't look too happy about that.
Yeah, I don't think we all get forced into fighting our parental figures, or our children getting forced into fighting their parental figures. But giving some kind of context into speaking with them, there can still be that nervous tension. You know, they're an authority figure in general. Some people just can't deal with that. I think it helps to embody one of these tropes in a way, and allow you to, what would this person do? They would retort, they would stand up for themselves. Princess Leia, I'm handcuffed and about to be tortured, but you know what? I'm holding my head high. You know, it's giving you a persona to embody and pull strength from.
For me, Star Wars always gave me something bigger than myself to stand with because of the whole idea with the Force. But when it came to negotiating parental dialogue, I found that Spock and Jean-Luc Picard helped me out a lot more because of just they'd be able to pull yourself analytically and have a conversation. Because but that's a whole different type of mindset of space opera. And so bringing it to Star Wars, parental stuff, you know, I think I related to maybe a conflict between Luke and Obi-Wan in the sense of perspectives of the truth as you get older and discover that your parents are human beings, and that even though I might have gotten lessons from my parents or my mentors, there comes a chance when I have to listen to the inner guru and make those decisions for myself. And that goes all the way back to the Mahabharata and Ekalavya and Drona and all that stuff, but that's huge. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, that conversation between Luke and Obi-Wan, as simple as it is, about his dad, and, you know, whether they had to just change something in the script to make it work or something, that's still an interesting conversation that definitely has a lot of tension, I think.
I think the connection with the Force Ghost is has also like somewhat of an impact with that as well, because many of us may not have the opportunities in our lives to share many moments with our parental figures, and the idea of that connection of that force ghost. You know, what would my father have done? What would my grandfather have done? You know, especially when dealing with difficult situations. You know, with Luke and Yoda at the burning tree. You know, in the last films. You know, just when you're decimated as, you know, as a human being, and you have to, you know, refer to things that are beyond you, but figures that are like parents to you, figures who are like fathers and mothers to you, and how they can tell you like you need to let it go. You know, the simplest things, like it's not important, it's just a bunch of books, it's not important, you know. But yeah, as far as conflicts, be careful not to assume too much, because then you'll have a Kylo Luke situation, and next thing you know, you push them away too far. Don't
true.
attack your kids in the middle of the night, guys.
Oh, anonymous text about, what about Django? We didn't even talk about that. I was texting Django and Boba.
I don't think they were in it long enough to really establish that relationship. They were more just for the length of time they were in there. It was almost like Django had a little assistant instead of he was the father of Boba. They kind of bring it back now, having Boba in The Mandalorian, where he talks about his father. And I think that if we have more of that coming with it in the Book of Boba Fett, where he talks about, well, my father would have done this, I think that's going to show a little more insight in that. But just from Attack of the Clones, not enough there to give that establishment.
When Boba Fett returned in The Mandalorian, there was a strong sense of redemption as an adult trying to come to terms with his father's tradition, and knowing that he's a clone, and knowing that, like, as an adult, he knows all those things, but then he lost his armor. He was stripped of it. He was in the desert. He was trying to just take out Tusken Raiders. And then finally he gets his armor back. And then it was like, almost like he was allowed finally as a grown man to don the spirit of his dad. And I think that might be a subtle thing, but that's what I got from it. And that's what I really enjoyed about the return of Boba Fett. And outside of those funny memes where he's like, this is my dad, Jango Fett, and he's dancing on his hall. Those are funny memes, but he didn't know his dad. His dad died when he was like a kid. Like, how the hell did he, man, rough living. And so getting that armor, it's huge. It's almost like Patroclus donning Achilles armor or something. It's, to me, that is. Another question came up. I didn't see that question. Anonymous, do you want to chime in with it? Because it disappeared too fast.
Oh, it was just about Django and Boba versus Django and the clones.
Oh, interesting.
A bunch of fatherless clones versus Boba, who did have his father, at least for a little while. Yeah, I could see that.
And then you got Captain Rex, who went against his conditioning. That's pretty deep.
Rex would definitely be the surrogate father of the rest of them, since he was, generation one.
What if they brought Rex back into Boba Fett? Because he'd still be alive, right? Or is he dead? Is he dead by then?
He might be dead. I mean, he was in Rebels.
But he'd be mad old. Anyways.
Yeah.
Oh, he was also wasn't he in Empire Strikes Back as well?
He was in Jedi. They say he's in Jedi. He's like that dude with the beard next to the, and I think fans just created that and they rolled with it. That's what I think. But I think it's cool nonetheless. It's just like, here's this old warriors never die kind of dude, which I think is pretty cool. Well, we're kind of running. We got about 10 minutes left. Is there anything on our mind as dads and fandom, or anything here's a question. I don't know if you really introduce your kids to fandom or they discover it. I mean, media is just like all over the place.
It's both. Some of them they're going to find on their own. Like people, we're introduced to things, but we also discover things on our own. They're going to do the same thing. The stuff that you show them when it comes to fandom, are tiny pieces of yourself. You want to help to explain to them something about yourself. You can introduce them to Star Wars. You can introduce them to D&D, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Legos, whatever it is, whatever your fandom is. You can introduce them to that and say, the reason I like this is, and fill in your own blanks. That is a huge thing that fandom does for us.
There's so much out there now. I mean, we just talked about 2 or 3 things, mostly Star Wars, but a little bit of D&D, Lord of the Rings. You know, we didn't even get into like Kal-El and Jor-El, or you know, like there's so much you could.
We didn't talk about Marvel. We didn't talk about DC.
Wolverine and X-23,
or like, you know, or Bruce Wayne, dude. You know, him not having a dad and then losing Robin, and you know, I mean, there's like tons of stuff there, and they're all. I think one of the reasons it's good to focus on Star Wars is, one, it's such a huge mega saga. There's so much you can go into with it, and all those things you can go into that I just mentioned, you can go into that deep level too. And yeah, finding out what your kid likes. I feel like it just had like a space. My brain just left. Anyways, my brain just left right now. It's too early for me.
Alfred, what about you?
I think it's super important to expose them as much as possible. I grew up in a household where science fiction wasn't a thing. I discovered science fiction by myself. It was, you know, staying up until like 12 o'clock to watch, you know, Doctor Who episodes and stuff like that, where I would, you know, piss my pants because it would be the scariest thing when like certain creatures would come out from these 1980s era-esque shows. And then, and it would give me nightmares, but next thing you know, like I was addicted and I needed to watch more of it. You know, 6th grade, I was introduced to D&D, and that like it just opened the world to me. And it was something that I could only share with my friends. And I ended up becoming, you know, very, very close with my friends, and shared that with them, not necessarily with my family. You know, with my own sibling, I mean, I see it like she went in a completely different direction because we didn't have any of that kind of exposure. Comics to me, again, it was friends that exposed that to me. So I built my language with my friends where we would have these little sayings and things like that, that we built our own culture. And I think, you know, shows like Freaks and Geeks really capture that sort of stuff, where you see how like your friends become your second family because the genres that you're into like dictate, you know, where your interest lies, how you see black versus white, how you see good versus, you know, evil. I think it's
the whole
important.
alignment system, I think, in Dungeons and Dragons as a boy.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. With my friends playing, it's just like, oh, wow. Yeah, I see that person's a little chaotic. That's okay. You know, I see that person's a little like, you know.
You could use that, you know, as well to classify.
It's just like, wow, what's up, lawful good Karen? Like, what are you doing?
Or your teachers.
Yeah, you know, and
you're gonna have Sister Beatrice, dude.
I know, right? Exactly.
Get ready.
And so it really for me, and especially with my kids, because I was living in Alaska at the time with, you know, my mom, and you know, Alaska is rough and tumble and cold. Me and my, you know, friends Ryan and Brant and everything, we'd all play D&D at their house, and that's kind of what kept us kind of going. And so similar to you, Alfred, it's like those other kids became my surrogate brothers, but I think that alignment system saved us from insanity.
It's a golden opportunity to develop that language, like Desso, you shared with us with your kids. It's like super important because language is going to dictate reality, right? It's going to dictate what choices they're going to make, the things that they're going to be into, that sort of stuff. So yeah, you know, I've read as well, like in books like Freakonomics, where they talk about how, like, you know, you want to have intelligent kids, like surround them with books, have lots of books in your home, and it's not just that you're using it as decoration, is that it's accessible, it's there, always there for them to see and to share. And to not share that, I mean, I think it's you know, you're doing yourself a disservice. So, you know, from from DVDs of cartoons that we have to comic books that are available to portraits that are on the wall, things that just constantly are like, what's that? What's that? What's that? You know, I think it's a good thing. It's a really good thing.
Hey, Todd, as the most tenured father here in the show today, what is something that you recognize that was a fandom of yours growing up that you shared with your kids that you now see with your grandkids?
Well, it's just kind of weird how it worked out. I mean, honestly, again, as I mentioned with my son, he had really no interest at all. The only thing he really got from me was an interest in mechanical things and engines. And now one of his hobbies at his house is they're building 500 horsepower turboed out Hondas. The grandkids, I've got grandkids. It's because my son married a woman that was 10, 12 years older that already had children. So biologically, I've got one grandson and a great grandson. It's strange how it works out. But most of them are all a bunch of gearheads. And it just seems like the younger granddaughter and the grandson are really, they're the ones that really got into Star Wars, and because they watch grandpa putting together lightsabers. And here's one toddling around at a year and a half, and here, try this out, and you'll pick it up, play with it, and smack it around on the wall. You know, so I got them into it pretty early on for the little ones. And it's something I didn't have with my son, because when I got married, he was already like 10 years old. So I missed a lot of that with him. That was more makeup with the grandchildren. So in a roundabout way, yeah, they got influenced in a roundabout way.
I like that.
Well, I think we're at a time to wrap it up. Is there any last minute things coming to mind, or we good?
I mentioned earlier Harry Potter, and I brought these out because this is an example of homemade wands. And your fandom doesn't just have to be the show. It can be these little wooden dowels with some glue and some paint. And you can find ways to further your fandom with your family, with your kids, and just expand from simply watching a show and talking about it, making it part of your household, and doing an event together that really brings everybody together.
I think Todd's getting one of his sabers or something, which makes, I mean, it's interesting that he says that he was talking about how everyone's gearheads and he's making sabers, and maybe that's what's going to happen next with his kids. Todd, you coming back? We good? All right, well, we'll wait a second. Yeah, I mean, it's with some of the kids that I teach, like I started introducing them to some sword technique, you know, with a foam noodle. Yeah, right. They're not really learning that. And and it's amazing. We played noodle tag, right? But I gave them a couple lessons about how to hold it, how to roll with it, how to do this, that, and the other thing. And then when we went back to noodle tag, all of a sudden it was like a bunch of kids dueling with foam noodles. And it wasn't necessarily noodle tagging. I mean, they still played the rules of tag, but it was so much more quiet because there was a focus, and that was a beautiful thing. Todd, you bring something?
Yeah, I wanted to show you the first Darth Alice lightsaber ever built. This started life as a 2-cell Rayovac.
Yeah,
1977. And 3 days after I saw A&H, I took a 1-inch dowel, painted it white, and just used a lot of that glow-in-the-dark paint, that tritium stuff. And I still have it.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Well, it's killed a lot of sapling Jedi and Sith.
It's dangerous to go alone. Take this.
Yeah.
Continue.
Awesome, you guys. Well, let's go. I think we should go ahead and wrap it up. I just want to thank you guys so much for showing up as dads. And Todd, thank you so much for showing up at the last minute. And it was great to have you. And and Alfred and Desso. And I want to just thank TPLA again for hosting this. And I hope we can do more things like this that are more intergenerational and inclusatory. And so let's keep thinking about ideas about how to do that. And, maybe next year we can have a Mother's Day special and see how that rolls out.
Awesome. Yes.
I've heard interest for that. So that's a good idea.
Yeah, or like, there's Children's Day. There's a lot of fun stuff that we can do that I think that over time it will allow more of the people who watch us in this conversations to kind of sit by the hearth of the fandom fire. Cool. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you all again very much. And I guess we'll just wait for Anonymous to click the sign off button. And thanks everyone for the questions who they sent in the chat. And we'll all talk to you soon.
All right.
Good
Thanks a lot.
Bye now.